Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show, joining you the morning after Arsenal's 2-2 draw with Chelsea at Stamford Bridge. Not the result that we wanted, not the result that we expected, but it's the result that we got. And in the end, I think there's quite a lot of thankfulness that we did get that result. We're going to talk about all of that and more with you guys, of course, in the chat box. But first of all, good morning to those joining us live. As always, we do these shows at 8 a.m. every single morning, be it to react to the latest fixtures like we're doing today, or to discuss all the latest Arsenal news that is going on in the world as well. And as we get closer to the January window, of course, we'll be discussing plenty of transfer news. So you will not want to miss any of that. So make sure you're subscribed and turn that notification bell on so that you are hopefully, if YouTube does its job properly, notified to when we, of course, do these shows. Good morning to those in the chat box. NSW, Paul, Sakayo Baka, Bakary Lasagna, Olawale, Bakary Lasagna, Shari, we've got Paul, we've got Stuart, we've got Mark. Who else have we got here? Matt G. Marcus, Gooner Mick, and Paul as well. Thank you, everybody that's tuned in. It's very much appreciated. And let's without further ado, I think, jump straight into kind of the first part of the show, which is going to be me having a chat about all things Arsenal yesterday. In a game where everything that could go wrong did go wrong, we still didn't lose. Now, I'm going to warn you, if you're not in the mood for somebody trying to put a positive spin on yesterday, you might want to tune out now, because I certainly felt and came away from that game in a pretty good mood, which isn't typically that regular for a draw. I'm usually pretty down. I usually look at draws as almost as defeats, really, especially for a side that are going for a title. And I said yesterday morning that I would be disappointed with anything other than a win, and to an extent that is still true. I am disappointed that we didn't win the game, but I think that yesterday morning I absolutely underestimated, how not winning a game can still feel, and depending on the manner in which it is achieved. And I certainly was naive enough to not expect what we saw in yesterday's game. So we're going to talk about it all, and we're going to be discussing plenty of it as well. Harry Simeon's in the chat box. Good to see you, my friend. Morning, mate. Up before Canton for once. It's a point that feels like three, given the circumstances. Make sure that if you haven't already caught up on Harry's paper roundup on TalkSport, which you can, of course, do at your own leisure. So I, for one, personally feel as though that there is, of course, an elephant in the room, which is that once again, I'm not at a game and we didn't win. So I can only apologise, and I can only apologise for the impending severe defeat, because I won't be in Spain on Tuesday either. But I have got some good news, is that I am going to be there for the Sheffield United game. Fingers crossed, at least next week. So yeah, the bad omen continues, I'm afraid, to say the least. But yeah, I went into the game with an expectation that we would be relatively comfortable. The lineup, even after it was announced that Jorginho was starting over Partey, that we'd still be relatively confident. But we never managed to get into any kind of rhythm at all. We weren't able to exercise our quality or dominance that we'd shown in plenty of other games this season. And I came away from that first half 1-0 down thinking, what on earth are these guys doing? That we need to wake up. We need to be so much more alert, so much more mature about what we're doing. And in the second half, and as the game played out, and even after we got the 2 goals, my immediate reaction was, well, I'll take that. I'll take that. Considering the fact we were 2-0 down, I'll take that. But after kind of reflecting more yesterday evening, as I was writing some of my articles on football.london, which you can, of course, check out. I did a winners and losers piece, which is out this morning, and I did a piece looking at the main positives from the game and what we can take from it. I actually came away from the game feeling a bit shortchanged, actually. And I think that Chelsea, while certainly were more energetic, more dynamic, more forward-thinking, actually got quite lucky themselves. Call me crazy, but that's how I feel. Because if we just take a look at their first goal, it's not a penalty. Or rather, by the letter of the law, it is, but it shouldn't be a penalty. The handball rule is a joke. We can all say that with relative confidence at this point. It's a disgrace to the game. Is the officiating and the rule book that goes alongside it that makes these officials arguably even worse than they are, because they have to implement the rules based upon what is determined by the Premier League or the PGMOL or whoever is ultimately deciding these crazy laws. That's not handball. That is how that you dive for a header. That is how you move when going for the ball. And when the ball glances off Mudrik's head and changes direction for an infinitesimally small amount of time between it leaving the Ukrainian forward's head and hitting Saliba's arm, there's no way he can react from a natural motion moving towards the ball. It's a simple. I don't. If this was for us, if it was for us, I would be saying the exact same thing. I'd obviously be delighted with the penalty in the sense that I'm, got my Arsenal hat on. As Chelsea fans, I'm sure, were delighted that they got this penalty. But in no way should any team be happy that the rules currently allow for this to be a penalty. Now, I looked at the Keane handball in the Liverpool game, and I stood there after that thinking, okay, I think that's more of a penalty because, like, Michael Keane's arm is outstretched and he leaves it outstretched as he's running. And I'm trying to think about how and where my arm would be in that motion. But whilst I've got kind of a little bit of a grey area around the Michael Keane incident, I just feel like if you're, going for that headed motion, like you're pushing your head out, which moves your arms back and your arms fly outwards, and you're in a natural position, and there is nobody that can tell me that Saliba is not in a natural position and that body shape is not the body shape of any player that would be doing what Saliba is doing, and then cannot tell me that header and the proximity to where the ball moves off of the player's head onto Saliba's arm means that he can do anything about it striking his hand. It shouldn't be a penalty. And if you think that it is, I just think you're wrong. And I don't think there's any explanation that backs up, because the evidence to support why it's not a penalty so far outweighs. But the problem is that it's a penalty according to the rules. And that's what sucks. So for those that say it's a penalty because the rules state it is a penalty, you're right. And I haven't got any qualms with you. If you think that it's a penalty because these types of incidents should be given as a penalty, I've got an issue with you, because it shouldn't be. Not in a billion years is that ever, ever, ever justified for a penalty call to change a game dramatically. It's ridiculous. So that's the first goal. Chelsea get a lucky penalty and go 1-0 up. Cole Palmer putting away very, very comfortably. The second goal at the start of the second half is the flukiest goal you will ever see. And of course, the irony is that it's Mykhailo Mudryk, of course, that scores it. It's incredibly fluky. It's a cross, and Raya has question marks over him because of his starting position. Now, of course, I don't think he expects the ball to fly in the trajectory that it does, but he shouldn't be as far forwards if he is. Even if he is a cross that's coming in, he shouldn't be that far forwards. He should be at least 4, 5, maybe even 6 paces backwards. I'm not a goalkeeper, but certainly listening to plenty of the people analyse this, the people that analyse this, Raya has been, kind of universally criticised for his positioning. And so I feel pretty confident to agree with that as well, that he was too far forwards in this moment. But it is, let's just take away the Raya positioning. It's incredibly fluky. It's such a fluke goal. And that gives Chelsea a 2-0 lead in this. And all of a sudden, any hope Arsenal had of kind of getting a quick momentum into the second half, it kind of evaporates almost immediately, which affects the next 10 to 15 minutes of the game at least. And this is what I'm saying about how Chelsea have been credited so much for this performance, that it was the best performance of their season. And it probably was the best performance of their season. But the only reason they got anything out of it is because of 2 hugely fortunate moments. Massively fortunate moments. And Arsenal, as I said at the start of the show, anything that could have gone wrong in this game went wrong for Arsenal, really, besides the last 15 minutes of the game. And so, again, to come away with a result after having so much bad luck go their way in the first half and the start of the second half, again, is a testament to the spirit and the belief and the comeback that we eventually showed. But let's just stick with Aaron Ramsdale for a second, because obviously Aaron Ramsdale wasn't available for the game because he and his wife Georgina have recently given birth. Well, Georgina specifically is the one that did the giving birth, but to a baby boy. And congratulations to both of them and their whole family. And I wish them absolute all the happiness in the world. With an experience that I have yet to experience myself, so I can't comment on it like that. But certainly a massive congratulations to them. So there's no point saying like, should Raya have started this game, because Raya had to start this game. There was no question mark about that because Ramsdale wasn't there. The question mark now is whether or not Ramsdale deserves a chance to come back in if he's available for Sevilla, if he's available for Sheffield United. Because I tell you what, if this was Ramsdale in this game doing what Raya did in this game, the amount of clamouring for Raya to come in for Ramsdale would have been so incredibly virulent and just present, And whenever I discuss Ramsdale, I'm told I'm biased. I'm told I've got an English bias to this, which is frankly ludicrous and borderline disrespectful to any, criticisms that I've got and any analysis that goes on around the goalkeepers. I'm told that Raya is far and away a better goalkeeper than Ramsdale, is what I'm told in the chat box and in the comment sections. And yet I am yet to see the evidence to suggest that that is the case. I'm yet to see suggestions or evidence or explanations that back up that point. Because nothing I've seen so far this season beyond the first couple of games in nets, let's face it, Raya wasn't really tested. He wasn't really tested against Everton. He wasn't really tested against PSV, to be honest. But then against Spurs, he was tested and made a mistake, and we concede. Against Chelsea, he was tested with a fluky shot, sure, but he's fallible because of his positioning. Against Man City, yes, he played the way that Arteta wanted him to, but ultimately nearly cost us with that Julian Alvarez moment. And in this Chelsea game again, he passes straight out to Cole Palmer in that moment, nearly makes a mistake. If he's doing the right things that Arteta wants him to do and he's making mistakes, then that's more on Arteta. And you have to point the finger at Arteta and say, if you want him to play like this and these things are happening, you've bought the wrong goalkeeper because he can't execute it. Because he's made two big errors against City and Chelsea from that distribution. And not only that, but one of the big things that Ramsdale was criticised for is that he went long too often. How many times in this game did Raya put the ball out of play for going long? It's not good enough, and we have to be as measured and as level and as equal in our criticisms as Ramsdale as we are of Raya. And for me, that is so frustrating that we might not see a change, because that's my instinct. My instinct is now that Raya will continue, and I'm going to find myself in a position having to criticise Arteta, which, I don't particularly like doing because I think he's done so many good things. But there are not fallacies. He is fallible in certain instances. And if he keeps Raya in net after making these errors and after making these big speeches about, accountability and having to change the goalkeepers of certain games and the goalkeepers have got to do the right thing, it just builds up this doubt. It builds up this frustration. It builds up accusations that he's misleading us with some of the words that he's using. And I don't think that's unfair to say. So David Raya, I hope he improves, but I hope Ramsdale gets the opportunity, because Raya has opened the door and Arteta should allow Ramsdale to walk back through that door and prove himself in the games in which he comes back in for. And I hope that he does. And if he makes mistakes, we'll call Ramsdale out for that as well. But for the moment, I'd like to see Raya moved out of net and Ramsdale brought back in. I'll tell you what, bottom line at the moment is I'm not activating that release clause that we've got and that option to buy. I'm not spending 30-odd million quid or whatever it is to bring him in, because so far he's not shown me that he's worth an investment of that amount to replace Aaron Ramsdale. Anyway, let's go on to the more positive things from the game, because I've talked 40 minutes and I feel like I've not talked about enough positives yet. Declan Rice. Absolutely fantastic. Gloriously good. Just take the goal out of it for a second. Take the what is a stunningly great piece of intuition, initiative, and execution out of that, and just focus on the performance. Focus on the determination. Focus on the composure. Focus on the progression. Focus on the levelling up of the midfield. Chelsea had Moises Caicedo, who had I think not as good a game as what some Chelsea fans will have you believe. I think that he made some questionable decisions during that game and lacked the composure that Raya showed. Enzo Fernandez, who was brilliant, and I'm incredibly jealous that Chelsea have that player because he is fantastic, is Enzo Fernandez. And Conor Gallagher, who had a really good game as well. And again, I think he's an underrated player. And, when we talk about how much West Ham were willing to pay for him, I think it was upwards of £40 million. People laughed at that. I'm not so sure. I think Conor Gallagher is a very good player. He basically took those three on by himself because Jorginho wasn't present, really. Jorginho was not, and I like Jorginho. And this isn't going to turn into a Jorginho bashing session because he's had good games and he did do that game against Man City. I thought Jorginho was really good against Man City, but he wasn't in this game. And that meant that Rice, without a doubt, took those three midfielders on effectively with Jorginho alongside him being very much targeted. And so he won for me. To take on those three and to win and to be as influential as he was and to win back passes and win back possession and just so good, so incredibly good. And I cannot fathom what would have happened if Arsenal had allowed Man City to sign him instead. Scary, scary things would have happened, I'm sure. It was frustrating that Partey wasn't in the game. I don't have any information as to why he wasn't. He played for Ghana in the international break and spoke to our good friend of the show, Mike McDonald, told him that he was fit. I don't know if that was inaccurate or not, but I trust Mike. And so to not see him come on was odd. I know why Smith Rowe came on because we were 2-0 down, and in that situation, you want to be more offensive, more attacking, and give more initiative going forwards. And Vieira wasn't in the team either, and he wasn't injured, by the way. Fabio Vieira was not injured. He was just not picked for this squad. Interesting, very, very interesting indeed. And I think that if Partey was there, it would have been very different, and the midfield battle would have been very different. And hopefully Partey and Rice can start the game in midweek against Sevilla, and hopefully we can control the game far, far better with both of them on the field. But again, Declan Rice is an unbelievable footballer. And for anyone that tells me he's not world-class, I kindly ask you to somehow argue that case. He's the best centre midfielder in his position, in my view, and is just unbelievably consistent in his performances. The goal, I loved his interview with Arsenal.com after the game in which he said he watched the Beckham documentary last night, or the night before last, sorry, and it kind of inspired that goal. I'm so glad he watched that documentary because maybe he doesn't take that shot on. So yeah, unbelievable view, and certainly Rice, for me, continues to be a world-class midfielder and probably the best player for the Gunners this season alongside William Saliba. Yeah, brilliant. And then the equaliser. Massive props, first of all, to Kai Havertz and Bukayo Saka. I thought we'll talk a bit more about Havertz in a second, but Saka in particular had really had to persist with Cucurella, who had a decent game as well. Yes, he was kicking him. Yes, he was holding him. But I thought Cucurella played really well and kept Saka quiet. But the thing about Saka is that you have to keep him quiet all game. And if you give him an inch of space, he will punish you. And that cross from Saka is very, very good. Very, very good indeed. And Trossard is in the right place at the right time. His run is perfect. His execution of the shot is perfect. And celebration was equally as perfect as well. Trossard was gloriously good in that moment. And, I think that we talked, in even the morning show yesterday, and we were asked the question, what's happened to Trossard? He's not been able to continue that momentum from the summer. He hadn't been able to continue that preseason momentum that he got. And he thankfully did in this game show why he is important. And he keeps popping up in big moments. He keeps popping up in situations whereby, he's able to have an influence on the game and have an influence on things in smaller moments. And there was an irony about Mudryk and Trossard scoring. But you can and I love this comment from Faluso, which is I can see why Smith Rowe doesn't start. And it's because of Trossard's impact in games. It's because of his ability to score goals, his ability to be composed on the ball and make a real difference. And I like him from the bench more than I like him from the start. I really do, hopefully, put ourselves in a position where Leandro Trossard is a player that can continue to have more of an impact on games because my goodness me, is he capable of doing it? And he certainly showed it. Now, we need to talk about Martin Odegaard, which I don't like to do because Martin Odegaard is, you all know, one of my, if not my favourite player in this Arsenal squad, for what he does with the football, for what he does off the field, for what he is as a person. I love the guy. I think he's great. But he went missing yesterday again. And it's another game against a big team where Odegaard went missing. And there's clear reasons as to why. There's clear reasons as to why he's gone missing in this game. And it's because in matches in which Arsenal don't have the majority of the ball, he just cannot have that same level of influence on things. If we don't have the ball as much off the ball, he might press, he might run, he might do those really good things. But he is what I like to call a catalyst of a player. He's an emphasizer of a player. And when Arsenal are playing well, it's usually because Odegaard's playing well. And in turn, there's kind of this feedback loop, which is all about if Arsenal are on the ball, he can play his best games, he can influence the play. And, we've seen him have some fantastic games against big teams. We know that. But there are plenty of examples this season, Spurs, City the other week, and now today, or rather yesterday against Chelsea, where he ultimately didn't have that game. Gooner says he's a fair weather player. That's not true. Not true whatsoever. And the point of the matter of fact is that in games whereby Arsenal are playing well and have their more fluidity, and in some games where they're not as well, Odegaard can take the game by the scruff of the neck. And we've seen him do that on occasion. But it tends to be in the games where the midfield is broken up, where we're losing that middle third battle. And, Jorginho in particular has, I think, a big part to play in the fact that Odegaard didn't necessarily have his best game as well. Because if you've got kind of a midfield dominance, if you've got Rice and Partey, or in some cases Havertz, Odegaard is able to do more. The game against Bournemouth, for instance, is a great example of where, we're playing with more possession, we're playing with more dominance, and he's able to have more of an influence on the game. And we've seen it happen in loads of opportunities. Calling him a fair weather player isn't fair, because that's not true. And in certainly times of real difficulty, he has still shone. But I just think that Redknapp says Clive would tell you that he always plays bad after the interlull. Maybe that's true. He had a real big blow during the interlull, which was Norway's defeat to Spain. And I don't know whether or not that made an impact. It shouldn't make an impact. We should be professional enough for that not to happen, but it's worth mentioning. I hope that changes. I hope that it improves. I hope that he can prove to plenty of supporters that during these bigger games, he can have more of an influence on things, because there are too many examples growing of when he doesn't. And that needs to change. But there are certainly loads of other factors involved. And I think the midfield structure is certainly part of that. I think the overall performance of the team is another one as well. And I think that Chelsea's midfield do really, really well to break up play, like Caicedo and Enzo are top players. And ultimately, he wasn't able to get into the game as much as he would have done. And that's a credit to Chelsea as well it is to our own shortcomings. Now, the selection sure has questions. And the questions are really from why wasn't Partey involved? That's the question that I have for Mikel Arteta. And we don't really know the answer. And there may be a good answer for that. Other than that, I think the selection was fine. If Partey would come in for Jorginho and it's our best 11, basically. But what I would say is that once again, the biggest criticism I always have of Arteta is that his in-game management is at times in question. And once again, the changes that he made to the game changed things for the better. Now, there's a question that I have for the timing of the substitutions, of course, but I have also a question mark about Tomiyasu, which I'll come on to in a second. But I would have liked to have seen Havertz on sooner, because Havertz, when he came on, gave us a target. I still had people in my mentions criticising Kai Havertz, which I find so... I think it revealed a lot about individuals yesterday who criticised Havertz, because there was a moment in his own half where he nearly gave the ball away. And it didn't happen. He nearly gave the ball away, but it didn't happen. And we kept possession. But everything else that he did was good. Everything else Havertz did in the game was great. He won headers, he won the ball, he was up there in the final third creating problems. He was obviously involved in the build-up towards the chances that we were creating. And yet there's some obsession that people have in focusing on one moment where he nearly gave the ball away. One moment of about 6 other interventions in the game that were all positive, and yet it's that one moment where he nearly gave the ball away that people focus on. And that, I think, exposes the real problem amongst some supporters, that they just can't get over the negative side of his game, which is still gradually integrating into the squad. He was great when he came on. He became a real focus for the team when he came on. I would have liked to have seen him come on sooner. And I hope that he gets more opportunities in the weeks to come, because he was part of the reason why we ended up getting an equaliser. He was good when he came on, and there aren't any other arguments to that. But the issue that I've got here is that Tomiyasu, and I need to give credit to, let me find it on social media. I think it was Waleed who tweeted it about the games in which Tomiyasu has come off the bench, and ultimately what has changed. I can't find the tweet. Maybe it's on my phone. But the times that Tomiyasu has come off the bench and come onto the field for Zinchenko has left us in a position where we are getting results. And we might look at that and say, well, that's just brilliant from Arteta and his substitutions. He's making these changes and we're then getting results. Well, here you go. So at one will leave one on Twitter. It's also time Arteta started reading patterns in these high-stakes games. Against United, Zinchenko off, Tomiyasu on at 1-1, we go on to win. Versus City, Zinchenko off, Tomiyasu on, and 0-0, we go on to win. Versus Chelsea, Zinchenko off for Tomiyasu at 1-0, we get a draw from the game. I'm all for controlling games, and you can absolutely do that against lesser teams, but better sides look to exploit and often succeed when they target our left. We need to show opposition more respect in certain games. And he's spot on. And against some oppositions, Zinchenko is really good for that. He offers you the extra midfielder. He offers you good progression of the ball. And kind of we can, in some ways, suffocate the opposition into their own defensive third. But Tomiyasu has come on in these bigger games, in these more important fixtures, and the ultimate dynamic of the team has shifted so that Arsenal have had a better grip on things and been able to go on and get the results that they've needed because of his presence. And that, I think, is one of the big reasons why Jurrien Timber was signed in the summer. And one of the biggest detriments this season will continue for me to be the fact that we don't have Jurrien Timber. It's because whilst Tomiyasu has come on and done some really good things, Jurrien Timber for me is potentially a world-class player in the making, who was starting at left-back and playing plenty of games in the summer at left-back, and even started the season at left-back, despite the fact that we had the likes of Gabriel Fear and Ben White was then shifted and Partey played at right back, even though we could have gone with Tommy at left back and we could have brought Timber in at right back. We didn't. Jurrien Timber's lack of presence this season is such a blow to the plan that they clearly had in their minds as the season begun. And I can't wait for it to have him back, but it's not going to be until March time onwards. So we've got a long, long time to wait and a lot of football to play before that happens. But I think in these bigger games, there's an argument that Tomiyasu should probably start them. So when we go to Newcastle, I'd like to see Tomiyasu start that game. When we go to Anfield, I'd like to see Tomiyasu start that game. Against Sheffield United, I'd like to see Zinchenko start. Against Sevilla in midweek, I'd arguably like to see Tomiyasu start that game. And I think he's put himself into a position where he arguably should be starting against Sevilla on Tuesday night. I really do genuinely think that Zinchenko works for some games and that Tomiyasu will work for others, but that Jurrien Timber will work for all of them. And that's why we signed him. So, yeah, I think it's ultimately positive. The changes that were made, there's still some, tweaks to be made. But for me, I think that was very revealing, and a credit to Waleed with that tweak, because I think it unveiled quite a lot about what needs to change in this team. Something that needs to change, though, potentially in your lives, is making sure that you keep yourselves as safe and secure as Tomiyasu can keep Arsenal. And that, of course, is by investing in NordVPN, because NordVPN brings you that safety and security that you need while you are online, on your tablet, on your phone, on your laptop. It gives you that ability to change your geolocation no matter where you are in the world. You might be in the UK and you want to hop over to the US, done. You might be in France, you want to hop back to the UK, done. And if you're not happy with the service for whatever reason, they give you the ability to get your money back with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can get an extra few months off a 2-year plan and some money off that as well by going to nordvpn.com/Gooner. I recommend you do it now, because you don't want to miss out on a great opportunity to get this deal, and you do not want to waste the opportunity to get the absolute companion necessity for any of your digital devices. So make sure that you go and do it. Right then, let's go to part two, shall we? And tackle your questions and your thoughts on yesterday's game right after this. Before I do jump into the chat box and tackle the questions, I did mean to jump over and have a quick look at the Premier League table after what yesterday's result means. So Manchester City are now back top on goal difference. Arsenal are 2 goals behind them. I remember being asked the question: if we don't win against Chelsea, does it take away from the result against City? No, I don't think that it does. It was a really important victory. I got very frustrated on social media when I saw the fallout during the game. It's why I often try and tend to wait until after a game finishes before I tweet, because you can end up looking pretty darn silly if you tweet during games sometimes, as certainly Arsenal managed to prove plenty of those people looked rather silly that had tweeted during the game, because the conception that we've not improved, and yes, I am referencing a tweet by Sasha LT Arsenal on Twitter I replied to, which I thought was a terrible tweet, because not only was the tweet disingenuous in the use of the amount of money that was represented by how much we've spent, because obviously one of the key players that we invested in with that 240 odd million that we've invested isn't even available for us this season. But we just beat the treble winners by evolving as a squad and by being more mature and more measured and better in our approach to that game, and eventually took the chance that fell to us to beat the treble winning champions. To suggest that we're not improving or we're not moving forwards and we haven't shown more than we have in cases last season is just, for me, not true. Yes, we're not playing the same free-flowing fast football that we did at the start of last season. But if we were doing what we did last season, across the whole season, we know that it's not enough to win a title. And so Arsenal need to change. Arsenal need to evolve. And to do that, you have to try and tweak things. You have to trial things. And when you lose one of the key parts of that machine that you had intended to use right in the first game of the season, yes, I am talking again about Yuri and Timber, that is going to have an effect. Not only that, but yesterday was the first time that we've been able to use our front three. People have been saying we don't look as clear and fluid as an attack as we did last season. Do you know why? It's because for our 9th game of the season, it's the first time we've used Jesus, Saka and Martinelli. And not only that, but it was a game in which we had one training session after the international break as well, meaning that to expect perfect fluidity and perfect kind of the meshing of everybody's views on things, I just find a bit odd. I find a little bit, not odd, I think that maybe that's harsh. I find it a bit too expectant and a little bit too harsh. First time in the season we're now to use that front three, and there's question marks about why we haven't been as good as in attack as we were last season. Maybe that's the reason. Maybe the reason that we've not been able to use those front three at all campaign, is a reason why we maybe have not looked as good. And I didn't think Jesus had a good game yesterday, by the way. I thought he was excellent at Chelsea last season. But we haven't been able to use that attack at all. And not only that, but we've not even been able to use the best midfield this Premier League season with Partey, Rice, and Odegaard as well, obviously, until the end of that City game, which then proved the differential because Tomiyasu getting on the end of that Partey pass before Martinelli scoring that deflected shot. But yeah, the Premier League table obviously looks like this for the moment. Liverpool getting what I find mad. I find that result against Everton pretty crazy, because despite them going down to 10 men, Everton, so should Liverpool. Konate definitely should have been sent off for a second bookable offence. Wasn't. Inconsistency of officiating, again, ever present every single week in the Premier League. It's a joke. It's a disgrace. It needs to change and just blow it up and start again, I say. Newcastle, again, another really impressive result. We play them in a couple of weeks' time. That's a scary proposition at St James's Park. It's going to be very loud. I'm going to be there. I can't wait. It was great last season. We pulled off a fantastic result that no one expected. I'm hoping that we can do the same again. Manchester United scraping through against Sheffield United, getting themselves into the top half of the table. And Man City themselves, arguably a little bit fortunate to scrape past Brighton, going down to 10 men late on with a Kanji getting sent off, obviously, because I brought him into my fantasy team. That happened. But yeah, that's the Premier League table as it stands right now. Let's go into the chat box and go into your questions. Jale says, completely agree with your narrative, Tom. This was a huge positive. It was. I think you should be positive about yesterday. I think there is plenty of reasons to be positive about yesterday. If Chelsea had won this game, it would have been off the back of a penalty that wasn't a penalty, or rather shouldn't be a penalty in today's game, and a fluky cross that went in. That's the only reason they scored. Beyond that, they didn't create Loads. I know that we basically gifted them a chance with Palmer's shot going wide when Raya passed out. The only other two chances I really remember is Palmer's shot that went just past the post when he reversed it with his left foot, and Nicholas Jackson at the end that Raya had to get down low, and it was a pretty poor shot from Jackson anyway. Beyond that, there wasn't that much, and people have raved about Chelsea's performance, but really, I don't think so. I really, really don't think so. But I could be wrong. But I think there's plenty of positives to take from yesterday's game, because ultimately, Arsenal, whilst we didn't play our best game and, didn't create anything, I think our XG was something like 0.11. We didn't create anything really in the game. It would have been really disappointing if Chelsea would have won, because they didn't ultimately deserve it with what they created. It would have been two very, very fluky opportunities that got them those two goals. And so for me, I think there's plenty of reason to be positive about what Arsenal did in the end. Let's go to Magambo says, I like that this season's top teams are so close. If anyone other than Man City has to win the league, need more than three teams close to them till the last week. I don't think that's going to happen towards the end, but yeah, let's wait and see. Gooner Mix says, are you worried about Saka's form? I get he's got a few goals and assists, but I feel he isn't impacting games too much. I mean, he's just come back off an injury, to be fair. I'm not necessarily concerned at all, because he picked things up. There were loads of questions at the start of the season about his form, but then he started playing really, really well. So no, I'm not worried about Saka at the moment. Ben says, do you think that Cole Palmer was lucky to not be sent off? Now, this obviously refers to a challenge on Jesus in the first half. In commentary, it was discussed that we've seen red cards given for these types of incidents. I don't think it's a clear and obvious red card. I would say that. I don't think it's a clear and obvious red. I think if he gets a red, I don't think VAR is overturning it. If he doesn't get a red, which he doesn't, I don't think VAR is giving it. And I think that's probably where we're at with that one. It's like the orange card. It's definitely a yellow. It could be a red. I think because it's behind Jesus and because it's down the back of his ankle rather than kind of to the side or into his leg with his studs, that doesn't make it. And it's in slow motion. I think it also looks worse than it is. I'd say it's definitely a yellow, but if it was a red, I don't think there could be too many complaints about it. It's one of those, but it wasn't given, and we move on. Fala says, Tom, how can you objectively say that you are happy that we gained a point on the other hand, say Chelsea offered nothing? Didn't say Chelsea offered nothing. So let's not misquote me. I said Chelsea weren't as good as people made them out to be and scored two fluky goals. The reason why I can objectively say that we're happy that we gained a point is because, as I said at the start of the show, everything that could have gone wrong for us did go wrong for us. We, for some reason, didn't have Partey. We concede a penalty that shouldn't be a penalty. They score a fluky goal. We're not playing particularly great. And we had one training session before, obviously, this game, coming off the back of an international break. And despite the fact that we looked like we were going towards a 2-0 defeat, we came away with a spirited 2-2 draw and a point. So objectively, it's very easy to say I'm happy with a point, because of how the game played out and everything that went against us. So to come away with a point, I can objectively, that's the word that we're using, want to say that I can indeed be very happy indeed with what happened. Louis says, Tom, thoughts on Palmer's foul? Oh, we've already kind of done that. Yeah, so I think it was absolutely, without a doubt, a yellow, but if it was a red, I don't think there could be too many complaints. Junior says, Tom, you're forgetting the penalty that we should have been awarded for the assault on Sanchez, on Jesus. Why was there no VAR review? Great question. If in the Manchester United Wolves game, and I think I'm right in saying this, and you'll tell me if I'm wrong, did the PGMOL apologise to Wolves for not giving a penalty? I think they did they not? And in that moment, did Onana completely clatter one of the Wolves players in the box that then didn't or wasn't going for the ball? I think it was Dawson that was going for the ball, got it, but it was somebody else that was tackled. I think that's what happened. And I feel like surely there has to be a review on the Sanchez Jesus, because Jesus was near the ball, sure, but Sanchez didn't get anything of the ball and completely clears out Jesus. I, I, I don't get how the Onana thing can be looked at as a clear penalty, and yet that can't be looked at as a clear penalty. It's a great point. I completely forgot about that, Junior. So thank you for bringing it up. I think it absolutely should be a penalty. He gets nowhere near the ball, and are we just giving license to goalkeepers to just run out and punch and just clear people out? So yeah, I think if you're going to compare the penalty from the Saliba one and the Jesus one is without a doubt a penalty, without question a penalty. So yeah. Yeah, I'd say yeah. I'd say it's a penalty, and I think it should have been given because of consistency. If you're apologising to Wolves for not giving them that penalty, I think you have to then give the penalty for Arsenal, surely. Let's go to boom, 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 boom. Let's scroll up. I feel like I've missed a lot of comments. I think we had a super chat as well. Louis, thank you so much for the kind donation. Palmer also asked the ref for a card. Yeah, there's no consistency with that rule, is there? He was on a yellow card and he then asked for somebody else to get a card and wasn't booked. So, yeah, again, a lack of consistency continuously being shown by the referees, as always. Chunho says, still unhappy with the result. A lot of our squad and starters, we should have won. However, I'm impressed with our resilience in this result to get from horrible situations. I think it's absolutely fine if you're unhappy with it. I'm unhappy that we didn't win. I'm unhappy. I'm disappointed that we didn't win, but I have, without a doubt, I think there's so many reasons to be positive about the fact that we came back and still managed to get a point from the game. I was so assured that we were heading towards a really unfortunate defeat, but to come away with a point is ultimately really, really important. Anne says, Tom, would you agree that the top 6 in the first 9 games, we have had the toughest run? Well, I mean, of the first 9 games, which of course is the first quarter of the season completed, we now have only one Big 6 team left to play, and that is Liverpool. So it's a good way of thinking about it. In our first half of the season, we've played 4 of the 5 other Big 6 teams. Yes, we've still got to play Brighton, we've still got to play Villa, we've still got to play Newcastle. That's also important to say, but we've not played any of the promoted sides yet whatsoever. Not played a single one of them. We without a doubt are and will have plenty more opportunities to pick up more points, and other teams are going to have much sterner tests than we have had so far in the first quarter of the season. So yes, Ant, it's a very, very good point indeed. Alon's one of the highlights says, TGT, do you agree that we didn't control the game due to the physicality and speed in the midfield? I think Jorginho's had a poor game and that had a knock-on effect all over the place. So I don't know if physicality is the word. I think dynamism is more. We lacked dynamism in the midfield. We weren't on it. We weren't, other than Rice, we weren't energetic enough. So yeah, I think that Jorginho played a big part in, sadly, why we weren't able to control things, and which is a shame because against Man City, Jorginho was really, really good. So it shows you against a big, big team, you can, without question, have that presence from Jorginho to be a differential and a positive result. Nick says, hi, Tom. Do you think that we were unlucky with the penalty in Eddie's late attempt? Yeah, Eddie got very close, didn't he? Really great attempt, by the way. I know he didn't score it. It wasn't on target, but to get even a shot away in that moment under pressure was excellent from Eddie and very, very close. If that had popped in, oh my goodness me. Can you imagine if we'd have come away with a win in this game? It would have been absolute bedlam. But yeah, definitely unlucky with the penalty on both ends of the field. Akbar says, commentator said if that happened anywhere else on the pitch, dueling for the ball, it would be a foul. So why isn't it a penalty, especially when PGMO has just apologised? Raya, Nana and Wolves, absolutely. Amira says Arteta's preferred Vieira over Smith Rowe and Nelson recently. I know we love drama, but sometimes it's really just a case of having more players than bench spots, right? I feel like these 3 will share 2 spots. And it is interesting that Smith Rowe was the first guy brought on the field after Tomiyasu at half-time. When we needed a goal, he moved to Smith Rowe. He picked Smith Rowe in the squad over Vieira. Vieira wasn't injured. That decision to play Smith Rowe on the bench over Vieira is a tactical one. It's a decision that was made. It wasn't forced. So, yeah, very, very true indeed. Let's scroll up. Raheem says, Tom, did you notice that all our London derbies ended with a draw, also the same scoreline, 2-2? Didn't we beat Palace? We beat Palace 1-0. So yeah, that's not accurate, Raheem. We've also beaten Brentford as well in the Carabao Cup, 1-0. Yes, we drew against Spurs. Yes, we've drawn against Chelsea. What other London teams have we not yet played? I'm trying to think who's still in. Luton. Do Luton count? I guess Luton would count. West Ham, of course, as well. We've not yet played them, but we beat Palace. So it's not all ended 2-2. I think the Spurs game and the Chelsea game are very different. Ironically, it's kind of an opposite, if you like, the Chelsea and the Spurs games, because Spurs were gifted their 2 goals against us. And ultimately, not gifted. We weren't gifted the goal. We were gifted Rice's in a way, but he's still got a lot to do in that situation. But certainly the way the game's played out, it's kind of a reverse of the 2 big London derbies. Luton doesn't count, says Sabre. So there you go. Fulham, we haven't played. Oh, sorry, we have played Fulham. Yeah, of course, we drew 2-2. So there you go. All the draws were 2-2. I think that the Fulham game is just, I hated the Fulham game. Because, we were so on our way to winning that. And Fulham didn't deserve anything. And we deserved to win that game without a doubt. And yet we came away with that 2-2 draw. So, yeah, frustrating. Leopold says, do you agree that Rice is better as the 6 than the 8? Also, I think that Mikel needs to get a starting player for that position. It's constantly changing. I think he can play both positions exceptionally well. I think it's better to have Rice at 6 when you're playing against a side maybe like Chelsea, and then you can have a Havertz or a Smith Rowe there. I think that would have been maybe better for this game. It's easy to say that with hindsight, but he went with Jorginho because Jorginho played really well against City. If Partey starts, Partey plays 6, Rice plays 8, and I think that's fine. I don't even think it's necessarily an out-and-out 8 role. I think it's kind of like a pivot, 2 DMs, with one being Rice getting a little bit further forward probably. So I can't wait till Partey and Rice get on the field together at the same time. So yeah, let's wait and see what happens. Follower-in says, Tom, someone said that they see why Smith Rowe doesn't start, and you agreed. Any particular reason? I didn't watch much after he came on. Yeah, I think that you look at the starting 11 of this team, and Smith Rowe doesn't immediately fit into it, rather obviously. Whereas if you look at all the starting players, Martinelli is obviously the starting left winger. Odegaard is obviously the starting 10. Rice would be obviously the other starting midfielder with Partey. So he doesn't start in any of those positions because all the players that are in those roles are ahead of him and quite comfortably so. So that's why. Yeah, he had a good performance, I think, when he came on. He was energetic. He was really determined. He was quite industrial in this play and actually won the ball back in really tough situations quite well. So, yeah. Morgie says, Tom, I mentioned Sir Bobby Charlton earlier, and I know this is an Arsenal show, but because of his stature in the game as a true gen and a great footballer, his passing needs to be honoured, without a doubt. And it was honoured yesterday during the game at half time. It was obviously honoured during the game at Manchester United. And Morgie, without a doubt, despite him being a Manchester United legend, he is, and from an English perspective as well, an icon of the game and deserves all the plaudits and praise that is going to be coming out for his contributions to the game. So yes, very well said, Morgie, and a apt contribution to today's show. Rohan says, our first shot on target was the Rice goal. How is that acceptable for a team apparently going for the title? Do you know what? And I think this is a great catalyst to the point which I'm going to make and which I haven't made so far. Sometimes you just don't have a good game. Sometimes you have bad days. And it happens. And that is acceptable because even Manchester City during their league wins have had off days. And it just has to be accepted. You can't have too many of them, granted. You're not. And the majority, in fact, nearly all of the games that we've played this season, we have deserved to win. And if you go through our league games so far this season, we have without a doubt deserved to win the near majority of them. And if we go through them, Forest deserved to win. Palace, up until we got that red card, deserved to win. Fulham deserved to win. Manchester United deserved to win. Everton deserved to win. Spurs, I don't think we deserve to win that one. Brentford, that's a Carabao Cup game. Bournemouth deserved to win. Man City deserved to win. The Chelsea and the Spurs games, for me, are the only 2 league games this season that we have not deserved to win out of the 9 that we've played so far this season. And yet we still managed to come away without losing. And sometimes when you have those off days, when you don't play well, and they are going to happen because it's football, especially I think in the context of where we're at now with as I say, one training session off the back of that international break. That is going to be the game where you are going to have most likely a bit of an off day because things aren't clicking and, you've not had loads. You need to be able to win or at the absolute minimum avoid losing. I remember the Leeds game last season where I was at, Ellen Road, and the whole VAR controversy at the start of the game kind of really did create a bit of chaos and unsettled us, I think. And then we went on to win that game 1-0. Man City against Arsenal didn't play well, and a lot of the teams, a lot of the rivals have turned around and said that, Arsenal, they won because City had an off day. They won because City didn't turn up. They won because City didn't have some of their better players. And Arsenal have had to just sit and take that and take people just underrating and not giving them the credit that they deserved for that win against Man City. But you know what the irony is that when Arsenal have a game like maybe City had against us, we didn't lose. We didn't lose our game, even though we went 2-0 down. We came back. We fought. We battled. And we came back and got a point from that game. So when City have an off day, Arsenal are criticised. When Arsenal have an off day, Arsenal are criticised. And people need, and that objectivity, that word, I think it was Fowler in the chat box earlier on used that word. I'm going to steal it from him. Let's use that word. If we're going to be objective about things, surely we've got to look at that game that we played against Man City. And we took advantage of the fact that Man City had a bad day and we won that game. But when we have an off day and when we have a bad game, we didn't lose. And yet there are people so ready, so eager to jump on Arsenal and to bat Arsenal away and to criticise them. But no, I came away from yesterday's game emboldened. I came from yesterday's game a little bit buzzing, actually. I'll be very honest. And I felt buzzing because I thought we were heading towards defeat. I think you can be irritated, you can be disappointed, you can be frustrated that we didn't win, that we didn't put in a good performance, and that's absolutely apt, and you're justified in that view because it's frustrating and it is disappointing when we don't play well. But you should also be very pleased of the reaction. You should be very pleased about the fact that we didn't lose, and you should be very pleased that despite everything not going our way, that we continued our unbeaten run, because that's really, really important. Very, very important. Lons on highlight says, TGT, do people not realise that this is the EPL? Of course, we'll get surprised and even lose sometimes. Yeah, I think, some people expect us to win every single game. And, I go into every game hoping that we win. And when you're in a title race, you can't afford to drop too many points. We know that. But you are going to have off days, as I say. And so to avoid losing is really, really important. Bally says, Zinchenko needs to cut out the mistakes. I've noticed that he always makes at least one or two silly passes per game, giving opportunities to the opposition. Also, we need to start questioning Odegaard's performances. I think we've done both of those things today. I think we've questioned Odegaard's performance, and I think we have highlighted Zinchenko's shortcomings in yesterday's game as well. Rich Carnu says, Tom Allen Hansen used to say that a mark of champions is winning while not playing well. Are Arsenal showing that, or are we just getting lucky? Well, I think, if anything, yesterday was an argument of really being unlucky because of the penalty and because of Mudrik's fluky goal. So, no, I don't think it's luck that's played into those results. I don't think it's luck that we managed to put in an excellent performance against Man City. Yes, there's certainly a luck about the goal that we scored, but we still deserve to win that game against City without a doubt. And we deserve to win the majority of games that we've played this season. So, yeah, that answers your question. Vera says, do you think that we're lacking creativity when Partey is not in the team? It depends on the game. I think it depends on the game. Without Partey, we scored 4 goals against Bournemouth. Without Partey, we scored twice against Spurs. Without Partey, we won at Everton and dominated that game, created plenty of chances. Without Partey, we beat Manchester United. So I don't think so necessarily. I think it helps. I think he provides a really good foundation, but maybe we lack a bit more creativity. I think we'll gain some more creativity with Partey and the team, but I don't think that it's kind of like a really detrimental thing to our creativity, because we are still doing plenty as well with him not in the side. But we need him back. That is without question. We need Partey back into this team. Rahan says the problem is this season, it's not just City and Arsenal. Spurs, granted, might fall off, but Liverpool will be there and they have more experience in a title race. Yeah, and, we might not win the title this season. I really hope that we do. And I think that we have a squad that we have built, that we aimed and planned to build even, despite losing a key part of that in Yuri and Timber, that we might not win the league this season. And, when we come back to assess why we've not won the league this season, we'll do that at the end of the campaign. But there's nothing that said to me that Arsenal aren't worthy competitors, because they are, and they deserve to be up there competing for the title this season. And we'll continue to ask questions. Only one team can win the league, and Arsenal are not favourites. They're not expected to win it. So we have got to win it against the odds, which is what we face right now, is that we would be winning the league against the odds if we do it. So let's wait and see. Let's see how the rest of the season plays out. Thank you so much, everybody, for listening. I hope you've appreciated this longer morning show to break down and assess yesterday's game. If you have done, please do drop a like. Please subscribe. If you've got any thoughts on anything that we've discussed, please leave them in the comment section down below. I do try to reply to as many people as possible and give my thoughts. I did have a comment sent to me yesterday. It was like, Tom, you don't accept other opinions. And I struggle with those comments because I feel like I do, because I respond to them. I think people get confused sometimes with accepting opposite views and the license to disagree with opposite views. I think you're allowed to disagree. And, I'm absolutely open to opposite views, but I'm also very, very entitled to defend my position and disagree when I think that it is. So I may disagree with you in the comment sections, but please don't take it personally. It's just that I have a different view to yours. But thank you so much, everyone, for listening. Really appreciate your time. And I'll be back tomorrow morning for, of course, all the latest roundup of the news and a look ahead to the game against Sevilla in the Champions League. Have a fantastic day. Enjoy yourselves. Let's hope for a Spurs defeat on Monday. And stay safe. Stay well. Rest in peace, Sir Bobby Charlton. And as always, up the Arsenal.